In this video, we're going to be discussing Rabbi Levi Yitzchok of Berditchev, the famous Hasidic master and famous for being the defender of Israel, as we shall see. He was born in the year 1740. His father was Rabbi Meir. His mother was Sarah Sasha. It's important, the name Sarah Sasha is because until today it's considered a merit or like a good omen to say the name Rabbi Levi Yitzchok ben Sarah Sasha. So those names have been preserved for history. His father was a rabbi, and they were descendants of the Maharsha, the great Rabbi Shmuel Edels, and they had a tradition that they were 36 generations of rabbis, so a very prominent family. When he was born, the Baal Shem Tov, who passed away 20 years later, the Baal Shem Tov made a big special celebration and said that a special soul was born today. This soul was going to be the defender of Israel, the defense attorney, essentially, for the Jewish people. And the Baal Shem Tov said, however, that the prosecuting angel said that there were conditions for this soul to come into the world, and he felt that if he would be successful, no Jew would ever do a sin, and therefore there were some conditions. Number one, one of the conditions were that the Rabbi Levi Yitzchok would never meet the Baal Shem Tov, even though he was 20 years old when the Baal Shem Tov passed away in 1760. That was not to happen. Another thing was that he was going to be given a rabbinic position that would make his life difficult, and also that he would be challenged by many antagonists. The Misnagdim, the opposers of Hasidus, would come after him, thereby lessening his prominence and his role, and making it more difficult for him to do his job, which was to defend the Jewish people. He became a student. He basically what happened was he married a girl from the city of Levertov, something like that. I'm not exactly sure how it was pronounced. Near the city was another city called Richeville, and this city at that time lived Rabbi Shmelka of Nikolsburg. He was not yet of Nikolsburg. He would become famous for his next position would be in the city of Nikolsburg in Germany. He was a student of the Maggid of Mizrich, the successor of the Baal Shem Tov, and he was eventually introduced to Hasidism, to Hasidus, through his teacher, Rabbi Shmelka, and he ends up becoming himself a student of the Maggid of Mizrich, and a very prominent one. Eventually, he succeeded Rabbi Shmelka in this city, and then he later was kicked out. Like we said, part of this idea was that he would never have a lot of peace and quiet. He was kicked out by the opponents of the Hasidim. Then he went to Zelichov, Zelichov, however you pronounce it, this city, and again he was kicked out. And then he went to Pinsk. Pinsk is a city in Russia. It's not far from in Lithuania, that area where the Misnagdim had a big following and a lot of control over what was going on in that area. And basically, he actually was kicked out. His family was literally moved out, and in 1772. And at that time, he was actually at the Maggid's court. And essentially, a very long story short, he ends up getting this letter from his family that his family had been moved out of town while he was visiting his Rebbe in Mizrich. At that time, actually, I believe it was no longer Mizrich. The Maggid had already moved to, I can't remember the name of the city. He already moved to whatever the city was that he had moved to. Before he passed away, he moved a couple times. At any rate, so what happened was he reads this letter in front of the Maggid at the Shabbos table. The Maggid doesn't react. Together with the Alter Rebbe, Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi, and other students, they decided to make a counter ban against the Misnagdim, which potentially would create, spiritually would create a Chil Hashem, a desecration of God's name, by essentially trying to cut off these people. very long story, and eventually the Maggid was not pleased about it, and he said this actually is going to cause my passing, and so that is what happened. In the end of 1772, he passed away in the winter of 1772, and but the Maggid told them that because of what you did, because of this cherem, this counterban that you placed on the Misnagdim, what you did accomplish was that the Chassidim would always, in the end, win. As it said in the Hebrew, Yad HaChassidim al Halyona, the hand of the Chassidim will always be on top. And we see throughout history that Chassidism always prevailed over their opponents, even though there might have been some challenges. At any rate, eventually he leaves Russia and now he goes to Berditchev. Berditchev is today in Ukraine. At that time was a part of Poland, I believe. And this area was finally, he was away from the Misnagnim's stronghold, the opposers of Hasidus, their stronghold, and he starts to flourish, and he becomes known as Rabbi Levi Yitzchok of Berditchev. When he came to Berditchev, I'll say a couple stories about his leadership in Berditchev. He was not only was he a famous, he was the rabbi of the town. He wasn't just a Hasidic rabbi, and more likely he was less of a Hasidic rabbi and more of a communal rabbi. And essentially, he had to deal with the community and the communal, ins and outs of what was going on. And one time, the community invited him, and they told him, "We're making a new decree. We need you to come and approve it." And the decree was that poor people would no longer be able to solicit people. They couldn't go to house and make a collection. Instead, the community would give everybody a stipend, and the people would contribute to this fund. And Rabbi Levi Yitzchok, in his classic way, said, "I'm sorry, but you said you were coming. You invited me for a new decree. This is an old decree. This is how Sodom and Gomorrah, Sodom and Amorah. This is how they treated their people. They didn't allow charity collection. So this is an old decree. I don't know why you invited me here." And they got the message, and they allowed poor people to continue to solicit and try to, make a living. He taught Talmud to his students. He had a following of students who he taught Talmud to, and really what he was known for was passionate prayer. And he would pray so passionately, and it would actually affect people in the room. That when other people would be there, they also would become aroused and start to cry and become spiritually awakened. And there are many stories related to that of people who initially weren't aroused, or people who it affected them for their entire life. So there's many stories revolving around that. Some of his colleagues said that he had the soul of Rabbi Akiva, and he also used to write kameas, which are amulets, and his amulets are very unique. Usually amulets you write Kabbalistic names, and which are related to the illness or the thing that the person is suffering from, and if they wear it, then it'll have an effect on them. He would just write in his kameas, Rabbi Levi Yitzchok ben Sarah Sasha says this person has to be healed, and they would work. So definitely a unique figure in that. He had a very unique relationship with his colleagues, especially Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi, the Alter Rebbe, the founder of Chabad. They were friends, like we said, back in Mezrich. When they were colleagues and students of the Maggid of Mezrich. After the Maggid's passing, the Alter Rebbe, Rabbi Shneur Zalman, was actually he was for 5 years officially the leader of all the activities of the Hasidic movement that had now been fractured a little bit, because following the Maggid's passing, there was no longer a central leader. But the idea was they would come together every few years and they would discuss their activities, and the Alter Rebbe was in charge of that, and that was many thanks to that. And that whole situation was thanks to Rabbi Levi Yitzchok defending him and essentially saying that he was the true student of the Maggid. When the Alter Rebbe was arrested in 1798, he was arrested for teaching Hasidism by the Tsar's government, as we've discussed in other videos. The first thing that he did was they sent a pidyon, a petition that Rabbi Levi Yitzchok should pray on behalf of the Alter Rebbe. And in fact, the Hasidim were so distraught that when they ran to Berditchev, which is again very far away from where in White Russia, this area of Ukraine, especially in those days, they had forgotten to ask what was the Alter Rebbe's mother's name. They didn't remember, or they didn't know. So they go to Rabbi Levi Yitzchok, and Rabbi Levi Yitzchok does a fascinating thing. He opens a chumash, and there's a special way that you can open a chumash, and based on where it opens to, this Kabbalistic idea, based on where it opens to, you get your answer. And he opened up and he did this whole situation. And he opens up, and the pasuk that he opens to, it says, "Vayar Yaakov ki yashever b'Mitzrayim." That it says, and Jacob saw that there was shever, there was food, there was provisions in Egypt. In Parsha, in Genesis, when Jacob is going to go to, eventually he sends his children to go to Egypt, which ends up leading to the to Joseph being found, etc. And so he said, Shever is an acronym for Shner ben Rivka. It's an acronym for that the Alter Rebbe's name was Shner Zalman, that his mother's name was Rivka. How come it wasn't Rachel? Why wasn't it something else? Okay, but he knew that the Shever stood for Shner ben Rivka. Obviously, this is an open display of divine intuition. He also, after the Alter Rebbe was freed, they also sent a message to Rabbi Levi Yitzchok immediately that he was freed. Eventually, they actually became relatives. The Alter Rebbe's granddaughter married his grandson twice. They had two separate occasions. The daughter of the Mitzvah Rebbe married grandchildren of Rabbi Levi Yitzchok. At one of the occasions, there's debates amongst historians which one, and it's a conversation for another time. They had these great weddings, the chasana of Zlobin, these weddings in the city of Zlobin, which was like halfway between the two sides. At least one of them happened there, and this is called the Great Chasana, the great wedding of these two great Hasidic leaders and the grandchildren were joining together. And in fact, from then on, the Alter Rebbe would address him as my mechotin, I don't know how you say it in English, but in-laws, essentially. Their children are related. And there's many stories surrounding these weddings. I don't want to get into all of them, but many of them were about these great rabbis respecting each other, etc. Another interesting part of this whole relationship was that when the Alter wrote the Tanya, he said, Rabbi Levi Yitzchok said, it is amazing how the Alter Rebbe fit such a great God in such a small book. That was his reaction to the Tanya, and then also he defended the Alter Rebbe against his colleagues, Rabbi Baruch of Mezabush and others, Rabbi Avram of Kalisk. These were also colleagues of the Alter Rebbe, and Rabbi Levi Yitzchok, who said that the Alter Rebbe, his way of teaching Chassidus in an intellectual way and teaching it to the masses, not just giving like short, passionate speeches, but giving detailed and teaching, and that people have to understand these ideas and concepts, these holy concepts. They were opposed to that, and Rabbi Levi Yitzchok said, "I don't know if you remember, but actually, the Alter Rebbe was the one who." We saw how beloved he was by our teacher, and he defended him, even though he did not necessarily agree with that style of teaching, or maybe he felt he wasn't equipped in that style of teaching. And he actually felt that it was he saw the way the Alter Rebbe's son, which became his son's father, his grandson's father-in-law. He saw how he was teaching Chassidus, and there's a story that one time he saw him at this great wedding, and he sees him teaching and explaining Chassidus in such depth and in public that he felt that it was like an ayin hara, and he grabbed his talis or his tzitzis and he put it on his head, and he felt that he had to save him from an ayin hara, from an evil eye. And so clearly he did not necessarily agree with that, but he understood that the Alter Rebbe had his way, and that he was given this mission by his teacher, the Maggid, and their teacher, the Maggid, to teach in this way, and he defended him. And the last part of this is that when his son passed away, Rabbi Meir passed away during his lifetime. The Alter Rebbe wrote a letter of condolence to Rabbi Levi Yitzchok, and that letter is printed in the second section of Tanya, or the third section of Tanya, whatever it's called. The Igeres HaKodesh, actually it's the fourth section. Apologize. The fourth section of Tanya, the Igeres HaKodesh, the epistles, the letters that the Alter Rebbe wrote that are connected to Hasidic teachings. That letter is chapter 28, or letter 28, which discusses the passing of a tzaddik, the passing of a righteous person, and that was the condolence letter he wrote to his mechutan, his colleague and relative through marriage. After Rabbi Levi Yitzchok passed away in the year 1801, the Alter Rebbe actually was in Ukraine raising funds for Jewish people who had been expelled by the Russian government. They had been expelled from their villages, and they had to go to the big cities, which was very difficult financially for the Jewish people. And therefore, the Alter Rebbe was raising money, and very famous. This is a very famous journey that he undertook, and he actually spent Passover at Rabbi Levi Yitzchok's home after he had passed away by his widow and his children. And he actually, apparently, he stayed because his widow had said, "Who's going to lead my Seder this year?" She was a widow now, and the Alter Rebbe himself stayed there and led the Seder for their family following the passing of Rabbi Levi Yitzchok. And the passing shook the entire Hasidic world, and the defender of Israel had passed away. Let's talk about his activities and being the defender of Israel. He was extremely charitable. He was always raising funds for weddings and other things. One of some of the famous stories of how he defended the Jewish people. There was a famous story of one time he sees somebody greasing the wheels of his wagon, and he's wearing talis and tefillin. Now you would say like that's inappropriate. He's clearly in the middle of praying, and why is he greasing the wheels of his wagon? But Rabbi Levi Yitzchok saw it. This is how he used to talk. He would turn to the heavens. He would say, Master of the universe, you see that even when the Jewish people are greasing the wheels of their wagon, they still remember to pray. That was his perspective. Another time, he met somebody who was violating Shabbos. He said, "Don't you know it's a violation of Shabbos what you're doing?" I believe he was smoking or something like that. And he said, "Yes, I know." And he said, "Why are you doing this? Is there is there a great need? Is something wrong?" "No, nothing wrong. I just don't care." And he said, "Master of the universe, you see, the Jewish people, even when they sin, they cannot tell a lie." And that was, again, many, many stories like this. Another story, a thing that he would do a lot was he would always call the Jewish people Sertze. When he was meeting another Jew, which means my heart. He had this tremendous love for another Jew. He would say, "My heart, how are you?" That was how he. It's a Russian word, I believe, or Yiddish. I don't think it's Yiddish. I believe it's Russian for heart. Another story was that one time he asked on Erev Pesach that they should find chametz, and they couldn't find in the whole city of Berditchev. No one had a chametz. They had all gotten rid of every single chametz, every single drop of chametz in the city. And then he said, "Okay, what about giving me illegal Turkish silk, which was banned by the Russian government, who was at war with Turkey?" And right away they brought whatever silk he wanted. And he said, "Look," he said, "Master of the universe, you see how the Jewish people, even though that they are the fear of the government seemingly is much more obvious, their fear of heaven is much stronger." Another famous thing that he said was that he said, "Master of the universe, if you would put God in the streets and the mitzvah, you put the sins in the streets and you put the mitzvahs in the books. If you have put God in the streets and you put sin in the books, the Jewish people will be much better. What do you expect from them?" The last thing we'll talk about is his book, the Kedushas Levi. It's named after him, the Holiness of Levi. It was written by him, according to the printers of the book, and his children, his grandchildren. He actually wrote it himself. However, I believe it was published shortly after his passing. I don't believe it was published in his lifetime. And he, lastly, after his passing, the story goes that he was the defender of the Jewish people. His whole purpose was to defend the Jewish people. And he said, "I'm not going to go into Gan Eden. I'm not going to go into the Garden of Eden, into paradise, until Mashiach comes." And he did. He stayed outside for a while until he heard the angels saying, "Kadosh, Kadosh, Kadosh." He heard the angels saying, "Holy, holy, holy," as it says in prayers. This is what the angels say every day. And he jumped into Gan Eden. He couldn't resist. But we see how his love for the Jewish people went even past his passing from this world. He was buried in Berditchev, and he had 5 children. Like we said, one of them passed away in his lifetime, one of them succeeded him, and one of them did not take upon any kind of rabbinic post. And he also had 2 daughters, and he was buried together with some of his children in Berditchev. Later, this area was I believe it was paved over by the Nazis, World War II. I'm not exactly sure the whole history, but recently, meaning in the past 10 years, they actually were able to find the original graves. It was paved over where they thought they were. They had put up stones and everything, and actually they dug deeper and they found where the original tomb was. And now you could actually go and see the original tomb, if I understand correctly. Um, Anyway, Rabbi Levi Yitzchok's legacy lives on through his Abbas Yisrael, his love for a fellow Jew. He is legendary for that, and that is something that all Hasidic teachings, a lot of the Hasidic teachings, always use Rabbi Levi Yitzchok to show how we have to have true love for a fellow Jew, and that is his legacy that lives on to this day. Thank you very much for joining. If you have any questions, comments, if I made a mistake, happy to please put it in the comments. Happy to respond. We love feedback, and we'll see you in the next one.